This is Larry Hatcher, and this is Psych 400 Advanced Statistics. This is an optional video in which I'll give you some pointers for completing your next exercise, which is Jamovi Exercise 6.80 Bivariate Correlation. The handout that I'm going to be talking about, focusing on mostly, is this one, Jamovi Exercise 6.80 Bivariate Correlation. I'm going to give you some pointers on how to do things, and importantly, I'm going to point out where to go in the Jamovi Guide in order to find guidance in performing specific tasks. As I go through this exercise, every now and then I'll refer to something that I'll call Jam Exercise Guide 6.80. Whenever I refer to that, I'm referring to the Jamovi Guide for Chapter 6, the Jamovi Guide that corresponds to this exercise. That's available as a download in Canvas modules. When you download the Jamovi Guide for Chapter 6 Bivariate Correlation, it looks like this. Your document won't have a green tint like this. I added a green tint to it so you'll know when I'm going over the exercise itself versus when I'm going over the Jamovi Guide, which has the green tint. One additional document that I'll refer to at one point is this one. This is Chapter 6 Bivariate Correlation. This is the chapter on bivariate correlation from the course pack that you purchased at the bookstore. Mostly it will be this document, Jamovi Exercise 6.80 Bivariate Correlation. I'm just going to hit the high points of this and give you some pointers on where to go to get guidance on how to complete specific tasks. I will begin by reading my brief description of the investigation that you're going to analyze. With this exercise, we will use Jamovi to investigate correlational relationships between a set of 7 quantitative variables. The data set is based on about 40 individuals who had applied for and eventually been admitted to a graduate program in psychology. And by the way, get comfortable with this study because I'll use it as the data set that you analyze for other chapters as well. We'll return to this when we do things like multiple regression. The main criterion variable in the analysis will be the student's overall grade point average earned while in graduate school. Predictor variables in the analyses will be scores on the graduate record exam, which we'll just call the GRE, undergraduate GPA, number of other constructs that are sometimes used to predict success in graduate school. You'll create a number of scatter plots. You'll compute Pearson correlation coefficients to understand the nature of the relationships between these variables. Let's scroll down to the next bit of description on page 2. Halfway down page 2, the variables below are the short names of the variables that appear in your Jamovi dataset. Following each name is a brief description of the construct. You're going to analyze variables like grad GPA overall, undergraduate, GRE, verbal, and so forth. I'm not going to read each of those variables. They're in your document. Now, useful resources for performing these analyses. A data set to be analyzed. You perform these analyses on a Jamovi dataset named Grad Student Data. Hatcher will make this data set available to you. It'll probably be in the Files or Resources section of the Psych 400 Canvas account. Oh, that's not true. I wrote these directions back during the summer before I realized where I was really going to put them. Where I actually put your data sets is in Canvas modules. You go to Canvas modules, you go to the one called P400 datasets and questionnaires, and you'll go to the section called Data from the Graduate Student Success Study. This is where you've gotten data sets that you've analyzed previously this semester. You go to the same location to get this Graduate Student Success Study data set. You'll need to either download and install Jamovi on a computer in the computer lab or use the cloud-based version of Jamovi to download and install the app. Click the following link and go to the Jamovi down page. If you want to download Jamovi on your own personal computer, which I think is a good idea, you can go here to do that. On the other hand, if for some reason you don't want to download it on your own computer, or if maybe you plan to analyze the data set using a Jamovi in one of our Open Computer Labs, then you'll have to use the cloud-based version of Jamovi. And this is the link that will take you to the cloud-based version of Jamovi. You can use this version anywhere you have access to the internet. Let's scroll down. I'm on page 4 now. I point out documents you can refer to for help, relevant section of your Psych 400 course pack. Basic concepts that I refer to in this exercise are in your course pack in the chapter 6, Bivariate Correlation, which I referred to a second ago. I am still on page 4. About halfway down page 4, we come to our Jamovi exercise tasks. Opening the Jamovi data file. Start Jamovi, open the data file, name grad student data. Before you do any of this, of course, you'll have to go to Canvas modules, find the data set, save that data set onto one of your own drives. And once you've saved the data set on one of your own drives, then you can open Jamovi and use Jamovi to locate the data set and open it up. Gives you instructions on how to do this in your Jamovi exercise guide on page 3. Let's see if that's true. If we're looking at the green tint document, we're looking at the Jamovi guide for chapter 6. And according to my instructions, I show you how to do this on page 3. Sure enough, toward the bottom, page 3, we have a section that says finding and opening your Jamovi data file. And it goes through the steps, step by step. Do this, do that, do that, do this, do this, and the data set will open in Jamovi. Now, what's illustrated in this green document, the Jamovi guide, is a different data set because I use a different scenario to illustrate computing correlation coefficients and scatter plots. So your variables will not have the names that you see in this spreadsheet, but you will go through these steps in order to open up the data set. That was the guide. Let's go back to the exercise. Exercise is going to be the main thing that you focus on. So I am in the exercise again. I am still on page 4, toward the bottom of page 4. Let's continue. What's next? Verifying that you can create scatter plots. When I wrote this summer, it wasn't real clear that Jamovi would always make the scatter plot procedure available in Jamovi, and since then it's become clear to me that the scatter plot procedure is always available in Jamovi. So this thing is an issue you're not going to have to worry about. I am confident that no matter where you're using Jamovi, you will be able to create scatter plots. So next couple of pages, I tell you what to do to create a scatter plot. I am on page 6 now. About halfway down page 6, we come to task 1, creating scatter plot 1. And we'll skip the setup and go to the steps. To create the scatter plot, do the following. From the Jamovi ribbon, click the exploration icon to reveal your menu of options. And from that menu, select scatter plot. This produces the analysis options panel for the scatter plot procedure. Panel appears on the left side of the screen capture presented below. In that panel, do the following. From the list of variables on the X, from the list of variables on the left side of the panel, select the variable undergraduate GRE verbal and move it to the box headed X-axis. Then select graduate GPA overall, move it to the box headed Y-axis. In the section headed regression line, select linear. Also in the section headed regression line, check the box labeled standard error. If you want an example of me doing this step by step, you can go to the Jamovi Guide for Chapter 6, and specifically pages 6 through 7. I show you an example of how this is done. The green tint means I'm back in the guide again. Yes, in the Jamovi Guide on page 6, we have these steps. Select exploration icon, select scatter plot. That produces the analysis options panel. I then go on giving you step-by-step directions on how to request the scatter plot that shows you the relationship between health motivation and exercise sessions. Those are the variables that are in my example in the guide. Those, of course, are not the variables that you're analyzing in your current exercise. And when you have created the scatter plot in the guide, it looks something like this. So that's as far as page 7 in the guide. Let's go back to your worry, which is the exercise. Now, once again, I'm back to your Jamovi exercise handout, and I am on page 7 of your Jamovi exercise handout. It tells you which variables you should select to create the scatter plot. When you have created the scatter plot, it will look like the scatter plot that appears here on page 7 of your exercise. Scatter plot that illustrates the relationship between undergraduate GRE verbal and graduate GPA overall. Having created the scatter plot, you're now going to create another scatter plot. And that requires that you slide the current results panel up so that you can create that next scatter plot. On the bottom page 7 and continuing to page 8, I talk about how you do that. Slide the current scatter plot out of the way so you can create the next one. On page 8, we come to task 2, create scatter plot 2. The next scatter plot will have the same criterion variable but a different predictor variable. These are the variables that you'll analyze. Follow the directions there. Create scatter plot 2. When that is done, still here on page 8, create scatter plot 3. This figure will illustrate the nature of the relationship between the same criterion variable but yet a different predictor variable. GRE Advanced Subject Test in Psychology. It tells you how to do it here at the bottom of page 8. Still at the bottom of page 8, we come to the real focus of this analysis. The reason you're creating these scatter plots is so that you can eyeball the data set, get a sense of what the trend looks like, get a sense of whether you probably satisfied the assumptions required for the real focus of the analysis. The real focus of the analysis is this: computing all possible Pearson correlations. In this section, you'll compute all possible Pearson correlations between the 7 variables listed at the beginning of this exercise. In the exercise, bottom page 8, continuing to page 9, it says click the regression icon from the resulting menu, select correlation matrix. You're going to request that Jamovi compute all possible correlations between these variables. And notice what I've highlighted here. Important, must place the variables in this order. So pay close attention to that. Make sure that's the order they're in. In computing the analysis, you'll have an analysis options panel, and it tells you request these options in the analysis options panel. If you want an example of me doing this analysis with a different set of variables in a different data set, go to my Jamovi Exercise Guide for Chapter 6, pages 10 through 12. That's the same Jamovi Guide I've been looking at throughout this video, pages 10 through 12. Let's see what we have. Here's page 10. In the Jamovi Guide, page 10, near the bottom of page 10, we have this section headed Creating a Matrix of Correlations. To slide your last scatter plot up and out of the way, you'll request that Jamovi provide analysis options panel for a new procedure, the correlation matrix procedure. Do the following. You'll select the regression icon at the top of the ribbon. Then you'll select correlation matrix. That produces this analysis options panel. Continuing, I'm on the bottom of page 11 in the guide. Let's assume you want to create a table of correlation coefficients in which all the coefficients appear in the same configuration that's shown on page 11 of Chapter 6 of your course pack. To accomplish this, you have to move the variables from the box on the left to the box on the right in the following sequence: exercise sessions, and then health motivation, and so forth. So in my guide, I do it in this order, so you'll get the sequence correlation coefficients you want. Then select the options indicated below, so your Jamovi interface looks like this. This is the analysis options panel that's on page 12 of your guide. And these are the same options that you should request for the exercise that you are now completing, the exercise for the graduate student success data set. And below that, I offer some explanatory notes about this analysis options panel. It's always a good idea to skim this, because very often here I'll say a few things about what you're requesting and how you'll interpret those results. So I have landed on page 12 of the guide. Let's go back to the exercise. The exercise is what you are completing. I'm now back in the exercise. I'm at the bottom of page 9 of the exercise, where the exercise says that when you're finished requesting the analyses that you're supposed to request, your interface should look like the following. You'll see this on page 10. On page 10, I show you what variables you're analyzing, the sequence in which they should appear in the variables box. I indicate which options you should be requesting in the analysis options panel. I even show what the results should look like. Here's the correlation matrix that you have just created. You should check your correlation matrix against this and make sure that the figures match. When you get that far, we come to this note. End of the Jamovi task. Continues to questions on the next page. As you know, part 2 of my exercises is where you answer questions about your output. And here I give you some tips about where to go to get the information you need to answer the questions correctly. I'm on page 11 of your exercise, part 2, questions. Question 1. This question pertains to the scatter plot you created in task 2, the scatter plot in which the x variable was undergraduate GRE quantitative. Your question: based on the appearance of this scatter plot and the regression line, does the relationship between graduate GPA overall and undergraduate GPA quantitative appear to be a positive relationship or a negative relationship? How do you know? Write your answer below. And here I have some tips. I say you could look at Hatcher's Jamovi Exercise Guide on page 7 for some guidance, but in truth, you'll get better guidance if you go to your course pack. Go to your Psych 400 course pack, Chapter 6, which is your current chapter, and look at pages 7 through 8, and there I give you examples of what a positive relationship looks like, what a negative relationship looks like. Is that true? Let's see. Here's your course pack. Chapter 6, Bivariate Correlation. This is the course pack that you bought at the bookstore at the beginning of the semester. Let's go to the indicated pages. Scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. I'm on page 7. Course pack, Chapter 6, page 7. We have an example of a scatter plot that illustrates positive correlation. Fictitious positive correlation between health motivation and exercise sessions per week. This is what a positive correlation looks like. Is that what your scatter plot in your exercise looks like? If not, maybe it looks like the scatter plot on page 8 of your course pack chapter. Page 8 of your course pack chapter, we have a scatter plot which is fictitious negative correlation between dislike of exercise and exercise sessions per week. Is this what your scatter plot that you just created looks like? If so, you're going to say, I have a negative correlation. Now again, this was pages 7 and 8 from your Psych 400 course pack that you bought at the bookstore. Let's go back to the exercise. We're still answering questions. I'm back in the exercise. I've given you some pointers on how to answer question 1. Question 2 asks about a different scatter plot. This pertains to the scatter plot that you create in task 3, the one that looks at the relationship between an undergraduate GPA, GRE advanced, and the scatter plot in which the x-axis variable was a different variable, undergraduate GRE advanced. Based on the appearance of this scatter plot, what was the approximate percentile rank of the student who displayed the highest score, that is the highest percentile rank in this case, on undergraduate GRE advanced? Well, that's a different kind of question. I'm supposed to look at a scatter plot and recognize which score was the highest score. How am I supposed to do that? Well, look at the Jamovi Guide for the current chapter, specifically page 8 of the Jamovi Guide. Let's see if that is helpful. We're on page 12 of the Jamovi Guide, so we need to backtrack to page 8. Okay, there's page 7. Now I'm at page 8. Here is a scatter plot in your Jamovi Guide. The y-axis variable is exercise sessions. How are you supposed to know what's the highest score that was displayed on your y variable exercise sessions? By seeing which score was that position the highest in the scatter plot. Here I have a note. Highest score on exercise sessions was about 18. How do I know which score was the lowest score? Well, which score placed the lowest on the y-axis? Lowest score on exercise sessions was 0. What about the x-axis? What if he asked us about the x-axis? Well, the lowest score on health motivation on the x-axis was about 2, and the highest score on health motivation on the x-axis was about 7. That is how you make sense of a scatter plot, to identify the lowest score and the highest score on the predictor variable, and identify the lowest score and the highest score on the criterion variable. And that was all on page 8 of your Jamovi Guide. Going back to our exercise, the exercise that you're completing. This is where we were, page 11. Based on the appearance of the scatter plot, what was the approximate percentile rank of the student that displayed the highest score on undergraduate GRE advanced? If you go to page 12, it asks, what was the approximate percentile rank of the student that displayed the lowest score on undergraduate GRE advanced? Again, that's what I just explained from page 8 of your Jamovi Guide. Let's go to question 3. I'm on page 12 of the exercise. Page 12 of the exercise, we're at question 3 now. Question 3a. Which predictor variable displayed the strongest Pearson correlation with graduate GPA overall? Write the name for this predictor variable below. Well, how am I supposed to do this? Well, guidance that I suggest is, in answering this, look at my Jamovi Guide and look at the recommendations I make on page 13. So, Jamovi Guide for chapter 6. Let's scroll down to page 13. Yes, okay. On page 12, we know we're getting warm. At the bottom of page 12, we have this section headed Interpreting the Correlation Matrix. We're in the Jamovi Guide, page 12. Here's the correlation matrix that I created when I analyzed this exercise sessions data set. There's a correlation matrix. On page 13, I say, the information provided in the Jamovi results table indicates variable that displayed the strongest correlation with exercise sessions was lack of time for exercise. Here are some of the details. The correlation was negative 0.46. I know it was significantly different from 0 because it's flagged with 3 asterisks in the note at the bottom. It goes in detail here. I'm not going to spend time going over the detail here. This is where you'll find it. Here was the correlation matrix. If I want to know which variable showed the strongest correlation with exercise sessions, I would look for the value that displays the highest absolute value. It's not 0.29, it's not 0.15, it's this one, negative 0.46. Correlation between lack of time of exercise and exercise sessions was negative 0.46. That was the strongest correlation. It's flagged with 3 asterisks. What does that mean? It is significant at the p is less than 0.001 level. So in this section, on page 13, I tell you how to find the variable that shows the strongest correlation and determine whether it's statistically significant or not. The next question in your exercise, when we look at it, will be, well, which of the variables shows the weakest correlation with the criterion variable? And here in your Jamovi Guide on page 13, I tell you which variable displayed the weakest correlation in the current analysis in the guide. And in this case, it was the variable desired to be thin, and I explain how I know that that was the variable that showed the weakest correlation. Is that in fact what your next question is going to be? Let's go back to the exercise itself. This is the thing we started with. This is the exercise itself. I'm on page 12 of your exercise. We had this question where I asked which variable showed the strongest correlation with graduate GPA overall. You can imagine what the next question is going to ask. Which predictor variable showed the weakest correlation with graduate GPA overall? And in the guide, I just went over the section that shows how to identify the variable with the weakest correlation. It was on pages 13 through 14 of the guide. We're in the exercise. Let's keep marching forward. Into the Jamovi questions. Remember, paste your output in part 3. And that is this section. Part 3, where you paste the Jamovi output. I made this a Word document so it'd be easy for you to actually copy your output from Jamovi and paste it directly into this document. For example, we have this item. It says below here on the next page, paste your Jamovi output from task 1, and this is the location where you would do that. And the exercise goes on, paste your output from task 2, from task 3, and so forth. Folks didn't seem to have much trouble with this bit of pasting, and therefore this is the end of Hatcher's recommendations for this Jamovi exercise. So that was some pointers for completing Jamovi Exercise 6.80 Bivariate Correlation. Look over this exercise, look over the guide before you get started, and I think you'll find you'll be able to sail through this exercise very quickly. Have any questions? You know where to reach me. Good luck with your exercise.